So probably this is my most controversial idea, but when I was young, I used to have a book called The Chronicle, which was like a history of the 20th century. It was only up to about 1985 when I got it. And I read it from cover to cover. And in that book, I saw lots of examples of people abusing power for long periods of time. Indira Gandhi, for example, was one example. But then in more recent times, you had Robert Mugabe, in power for such long periods of time that eventually the power corrupts. Robert Mugabe started off as being relatively celebrated, would you believe, until he brought Zimbabwe into financial ruin through hyperinflation and his policies, which were awful. And so I realized that there was a problem. When you retain power for too long, it corrupts you. And although there is always a need for some kind of leader, I would encourage people to try to lead themselves as the first option, and not to rely on somebody to be a figurehead to guide you through bad times, because ultimately, at the end of the day, you can only rely on yourself. So that's one aspect. So remove the leadership burden from the actual leader to lead yourself, to try to stop the need for a leader, because as again, Bitcoin, they don't have a leader. And I think it's one of the things that make them so successful. But we can't avoid that in Web3 communities. There is always somebody who starts, but that person, I believe, shouldn't be there for a significant length of time, because as you become entrenched in a position, standards start to drop. You start to make bad decisions. You may, start to be tempted by various aspects of the job, which don't contribute to the benefit of the wider community. And so self-replication, to answer the question, is about just replacing yourself with somebody who's better than you, and so that you can move on in the organization to do something else, and allow the people below you to come up. There's nothing worse than joining a community where everything's fixed and structured. You look up and you just see no way of progressing. Should be encouraged, and it helps decentralization of power as well, and a mentoring culture, teaching people. The benefits are huge, but it's controversial. People don't like doing that. People are scared. They're worried. What's going to happen? Where will I go? What will I do? I always tell them the same thing. Look, if you can teach and train somebody to be better than you, you are incredible. Right? You're so valuable and brave, and it just demands a huge amount of respect. And so I would consider people like that, who I find who do that, they're like gold dust. And I have managed to find people like that. Luckily, I'm very fortunate to have found people who have been able to replace me in my position quite easily. So it's working. But yeah, it's not for everyone. I have realized.
I'd even argue, right, that a lot of times, there's plenty of examples where CEOs don't stay on very long, right? The average CEO has like a lifespan of, I believe it's 3 to 7 years, something like that, because the CEO comes up with an idea. He's generally the founder of the company. He's like, okay, I want to do X, Y, Z. And then he is working to reach that goal. But he never knew that there was also A, B, C, D, and all these different tasks. And eventually the CEO will wear so many hats. And there are so many jobs that he has to take on new people. If eventually there will come somebody that can do most of the things the CEO is doing better, and he has to realize that, right? But most people are too proud, too ignorant to then recognize, okay, I built this. This is now my baby. Is it finished? Yeah, maybe not. But here's this other guy I just hired, who's a fucking genius, and he's better than I. Why not, if it's your baby, surrender your position and do something that you like? I have no examples. I love listening, for instance, to the Tim Ferriss show. I think he's a wonderful interviewer. He has a lot of very, very grand people in their field on his show. never heard an example of this, but it makes so much logical sense to me that you run into problems eventually while entrepreneuring. Is that a thing? And then realize that, okay, I now kind of built this, but it doesn't suit me.
Yeah.
And most of the time people just leave. I mean, that happens a lot. But
Yeah.
people taking a subordinate position in the same company, not really familiar if that would happen. I would definitely do it, right? I could definitely just take a step back and do what I love rather than doing what I think I should be doing for some reason.
Yeah. I mean, you know, of all my ideas, it's definitely the most controversial one. A lot of people are saying, Oliver, you know, in reality, that just doesn't work, you know, and I say, well, you know, I'm trying to do it, you know, and, you know, but it's still one of those things which I'm not really sure whether it is actually in human nature at all. You know, as you mentioned, there's...
it's counter. It's definitely counter. But,
yeah.
But my question is always, why wouldn't it work, right? I mean, it sounds to me like it's an ego thing, right? You have something, you want to hold on to it. You don't want to relinquish your position. It's relinquish the word, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to relinquish your position because you'll lose status. I mean, you could very well be an informal leader of a company as somebody else being the CEO, right? Somebody that loves the paperwork and all the bullshit, and you can be the ghost in the machine, if you will, without the title. But yeah, on the other hand, how does one become a CEO? I mean, you gotta have some way, shape, or form of an antisocial personality sometimes to be an effective CEO and to crave that.
Yeah,
and that's then usually the psychology of the people that crave a position like that, but then shouldn't have it, but they get there, and then the chance that they relinquish it is then almost zero. So, I mean, I love the idea, and it makes perfect sense because it's very rare that somebody gets into a position and is actually the best person in the world for that job.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, it's difficult, and also like when you have talented people, you want to hold them into that position. So a lot of the resistance that I found to this idea is that, you know, people just don't want you to go. Yeah, they don't want you to leave because they feel as if when you go, they will be significantly weaker. But in my opinion, that's just a failure to have replaced yourself with somebody better than you. And I often think that's just an issue of how you present it. You know, I know that the people who replaced me, especially towards the end of this experiment, are significantly better than me in several areas. Do they have the confidence? Sometimes, you know, they are, you know, naturally humble people. That's one of the reasons why I picked them, because they're, you know, they're kind, they're generous, they're decent people, but they're also smart, capable, intelligent, and they have all of those things. And so I find that they're sometimes a little bit reluctant to believe that it's possible. And that's one issue that I've encountered before. So I have to work on that, you know, try to instill belief a little bit better. You know, but yeah, as I say, very much a work in progress. And the criticisms you say are completely justified. But I'm going to continue seeing if I can try to do it and maybe extend the time. I think that's also the issue. If you do it too fast and if you don't have a succession plan in place that makes sense, then you know, it doesn't work. So finding that optimum time length is important. But I think it's a necessary element, because I think that the biggest problems in the community, as we spoke about before, is appeal to authority. Just because, you know, instead of like looking at the leader and saying, well, it must be good because the leader says so, or the leader's great, you know, therefore we must all agree. There's a lot of this going on. So how about we solve that by changing the leader, or making leadership not that big a deal and taking leadership on ourselves? Because I think that issue does need solving. It's the biggest thing that I find in communities is this hero worship.
Yeah, Interesting. Interesting. That's the thing, right? Being the leader.
Yeah, it should be the
Leader.
idea. It's yeah, exactly. You
Oh.
know, worshipping the leader. The idea is really the most important thing. The people around it, we all move into different situations, different roles, but it's the idea that should take precedence. You know, so removing a leader encourages focus on the idea, the actual subject matter, the issues at hand that we need to address, rather than personalities and
This is
stuff like which are
getting
distractions.